My boyfriend faked allergies to my new dog, said he couldn't breathe around him. I believed him until I caught him playing fetch with his ex's golden retriever. So I bought my dog a matching pajama set and changed the locks. When I brought Finn home, I expected maybe a learning curve. Some chewed-up shoes, a few early morning bathroom emergencies, the usual chaos that comes with adopting a rescue. What I didn't expect was Theo standing at the front door, coughing dramatically and waving his hand in front of his face like I'd just sprayed perfume straight into his throat. "I can't breathe," he said, pulling his shirt over his nose. I laughed at first, seriously. "I think I'm allergic," he wheezed, eyeing Finn like he'd brought disease into the apartment. "My chest is tight." Finn tilted his head, tail wagging. He'd done nothing but walk into the room. Literally. I bent down and scratched behind Finn's ears. "You've been around dogs before." "Yeah, but not like this, not in the air." He motioned vaguely toward the living room. "I don't know what it is. Maybe it's the fur or dander or something." I wanted to push back, say it made no sense. But he sounded serious. His voice was thin, his eyes looked a little watery. I didn't know enough to call it. So I asked, "Do you want me to put him in the bedroom?" Theo stepped back. "Can you maybe take him outside for a bit, just while I settle?" Settle, as if my living room had suddenly become hostile territory. I clipped on Finn's leash and walked him down the block. He trotted happily beside me, totally unaware that he'd just been declared unlivable. It didn't sit right. But when I came back inside and saw Theo sitting on the couch, rubbing his eyes, looking miserable, I felt guilty for even thinking it. He said he was trying. He said he wanted this to work. "It's just bad timing," he said. "You finally get this amazing dog and my immune system loses its mind." He kept apologizing. That was the part that made it harder to question. "I don't want to be that guy," he said, scratching his arm, "but I genuinely feel off." He offered to leave, said he'd go back to his place to clear his lungs. I told him to stay. I opened windows, lit one of those overpriced soy candles, pulled out the vacuum even though I'd cleaned the day before. Thea watched all of it and smiled. "You're amazing." I laughed lightly. Or maybe just codependent. He laughed too, but not really. Later, when he left, Finn climbed onto the couch and tucked his head into my lap. I ran my fingers through his fur and whispered, "You're not the problem." But a small voice in my head asked, then why did it feel like I was already trying to fix something? By the next morning, I was in full research mode. I made a vet appointment for Finn, Googled dog dander allergy management, and ordered an air purifier with over 1,000 reviews. Overnight shipping. Theo had texted, feeling a little better. "Definitely less tightness after I left your place." That word again, tightness. Vague enough to be concerning, just clinical enough to be hard to argue with. I responded, "Vet says I can bring Finn in this afternoon, just to rule things out." He replied, "You're amazing, seriously. I hate that this is even a thing." And just like that, I was the supportive girlfriend who solved problems, not the confused woman trying to understand why her boyfriend couldn't share a room with her dog. At the clinic, the vet ran his hands over Finn's fur, checked his ears, his skin, his mouth. "Looks great," he said, smiling. "Clean bill of health." I explained the allergy situation. He nodded like he'd heard it before. "Some people are allergic to dander, but it depends on the dog. Coat type, shedding, that kind of thing. He's a mixed breed, so it's possible, but not super likely." I asked if there was a test I could run to be sure. He gently redirected. "You could test the human, not the dog," he said. "Allergy panels, your boyfriend would need to go to a specialist." Right, ask Theo to do that. I already knew how that would go. He'd say he was too busy. Or that he didn't want to turn this into a thing. He'd be grateful I cared enough to dig, and then gently pull away from the idea of making it formal. So instead, I doubled down. Bought a HEPA filter. Swapped out all my cleaning products for fragrance-free, hypoallergenic versions. Vacuumed every other day. Laundered Finn's bedding twice a week. Started wiping down his paws after walks. I even stopped letting him on the furniture, which broke my heart more than I admitted. Theo noticed. "Wow, you're really going all out," he said one night, standing in the doorway and eyeing the couch where Finn used to curl up. "I just want to make it work." He smiled, kissed my forehead. "You're the best." I smiled too, but it felt hollow. Like I was getting gold stars for solving a problem I hadn't created. Finn, for his part, adjusted, sort of. He started sleeping near the door, which made me feel like I'd trained the comfort out of him. I started staying over at Theo's more. It made sense. Cleaner air, no coughing fits, fewer reminders of the space we were slowly retreating from. But it meant leaving Finn alone more often. I'd come home to chewed up shoes, shredded tissues, small piles of uneaten kibble. Signs of confusion, signs of stress. He's just adjusting, I told myself. But one night, I walked in and found him curled up on my bed with one of Theo's sweatshirts between his paws. He looked up at me with eyes that asked something I couldn't answer. I picked it up, pressed my face to it. It smelled like him. Like our first month together. Like the version of him that used to bring me coffee and surprise me with playlists and ask 100 little questions just to stay close. That version hadn't been around lately. Instead, I had this new Theo, slightly more distant, slightly more fragile. Always grateful, always apologizing, but never quite present. One night, I mentioned the allergy test again. Gently, just floated the idea. He blinked, shrugged. I mean, I don't need a test to know how I feel. What if it's something else? I asked. Mold, dust, your soap. Babe, he cut in, smiling. You've done enough already. Seriously, I feel bad. I don't want you to bend over backwards just for me to hang out. But that's exactly what I was doing. I had sanitized my space, restructured my routine, shifted my time, trained my dog out of comfort. All so he could drop by once or twice a week without wheezing. Except he still didn't. He kept saying things like, "Let's just meet at mine. That way you don't have to worry about scrubbing the couch again." Or, "I miss you, but Finn's probably not missing me, huh?" With a little laugh, like we were both in on the joke. Only, it wasn't a joke, it was a steady erosion. My home didn't feel like mine anymore. It felt like a place waiting to be reapproved. Still, I wanted to believe him. I wanted to believe this was just one of those fluke things couples work around. Everyone has something. A mother-in-law, a career change, a dog allergy. And the way he praised me for my patience, my flexibility, it made me feel like I was doing the right thing. Like I was good for managing the inconvenience. But somewhere deep down, I started to feel it. The shift. The way I tiptoed around my own life, trying to keep something intact that hadn't earned that kind of protection. I remember one night, I sat on the floor with Finn, brushing his fur while watching a show I didn't care about. Theo had canceled last minute. Migraine, sorry babe, love you. I wasn't even surprised. Finn leaned against me, heavy and warm, and I realized I hadn't held anything that honest in weeks. That's when the whisper started in the back of my mind. What if he's not allergic? What if he just doesn't want to be here? But I pushed it down. Because to admit that would mean everything I'd done, the air purifiers, the product swaps, the compromises, wasn't about love. It was about control. His. And the slow, polite way he made it feel like my own idea. Theo stopped coming over entirely about a week later. He didn't announce it. There was no dramatic shift, no argument, just a slow fade. Every excuse sounded reasonable. Work deadlines, construction outside his building, a cough he didn't want to bring into my place and trigger something with the dog. He said it with concern, as if his absence was actually a form of kindness. He started texting less, too. Nothing overt, just a slower rhythm. A few messages late at night. A check-in here, an emoji there. Enough to keep the thread alive, but not enough to feel like we were still in it together. And when we did see each other, it was always at his apartment. "You're just closer to the office," he said. "And honestly, I sleep better here. Your place, it's just a little harder on my lungs." He kept saying that. "It's not you, it's my lungs." As if his body was rejecting me by accident, I started packing overnight bags like I was the one with the problem. Toothbrush, change of clothes, treats for Finn if I was coming home midday. I'd sneak back in before work just to walk him, feed him, make sure he hadn't gotten into the trash. Then I'd lock up, head to Theo's, and act like this was normal. I was trying to stretch myself thin enough to keep both lives running. I'd walk into Theo's building with damp hair and sleep creases on my face, already tired before the day began. He'd kiss my cheek, tell me I looked cute, and make me coffee. I told myself this was what balance looked like. Finn was adjusting, in that way dogs do, loyal, even when you're half present. But his eyes had started following me more. He'd sit at the door long after I left. When I got home, he'd sprint to me like he wasn't sure I'd really come back, and I felt it. That ache. The knowledge that I was making him second-guess something he shouldn't have to question. One night, Theo and I were sitting on his couch, legs tangled, half watching a movie. I asked, "Do you think this will get easier?" He looked over. "What do you mean?" "You being allergic, the adjustment. Us being back at mine." He looked down at his hands. "I don't know." That pause wasn't long, but it was long enough. He added quickly, "I mean I want it to, but I can't control my body." I nodded, "Of course not." That was the trap. He wasn't doing anything wrong. He was just reacting. And how could I argue with a reaction? I stopped inviting him over after that. I stopped suggesting ways to ease it. I just absorbed it as a fact. My dog made my boyfriend sick. And somehow, that was now my responsibility to manage. So I managed. I stopped buying candles. I got rid of the throw pillows Finn liked to sleep on. I even asked my landlord about upgrading the air filter in my HVAC system. Meanwhile, Theo stayed in his clean, calm, dog-free space, always just out of reach. The more I adjusted, the less he showed up. And the worst part, I kept pretending it was mutual. When friends asked, I said we were just juggling schedules, that he had asthma and we were figuring it out. When Kayla asked, I said, "It's complicated." And when I came home to Finn curled up in the corner of the bed I used to share with Theo, I told myself it was temporary, that we'd get through this, that people make compromises all the time, but every compromise had started with me. I was the one folding, rearranging, rewriting my routines. Theo just kept breathing easier. One night, I walked into my apartment after a long day and Finn was sitting in the dark. He hadn't barked or chewed anything, just waited. I turned on the light and sat down next to him on the rug. He leaned into me hard like he was asking, "Where did you go?" And I didn't have a good answer. I scratched behind his ears, buried my face in his fur, and whispered, "I missed you too." That's when it hit me. I was the one who kept disappearing. Not for Theo, for the idea of him, for the version I wanted so badly to hold on to that I didn't notice how small-eyed made my own life to fit his. And the only one who never asked me to do that was the dog. Kayla didn't even let me finish the story. We were sitting on her couch, takeout containers open, Finn curled at my feet chewing a toy shaped like a taco. I'd barely made it through the part where Theo said he couldn't come over anymore. "It's not you, it's my lungs," when she raised both eyebrows, mouth full of noodles, and said, "He's lying, you know that, right?" I hesitated. I mean, the coughing seemed real. Kayla swallowed. People can fake a cough or work themselves up. You're telling me this man can breathe around dust, smoke, and whatever air freshener they pump through his building lobby, but not your dog. I picked at my spring roll. "It's not just the dog." He said it's dander, the way Finn sheds. "Oh my God," she groaned, dropping her chopsticks. "Do you hear yourself?" I tried to smile. "I know how it sounds." She pointed a finger at me. "No, you don't. Because if you did, you wouldn't be explaining it like it's logical. You wouldn't be making a spreadsheet in your head right now about how to prove this allergy is manageable." I opened my mouth, but she kept going. "You scrubbed your apartment top to bottom, changed every cleaning product, bought that weird air machine thing. You stopped letting your dog on the couch, which I know killed you. And has he done anything to meet you halfway?" I paused. "He says he feels bad." She gave me a flat look. "That's not effort, that's PR." Finn looked up, tail thumping once. Kayla reached down and scratched his head. "This one," she said, "loves you without drama, without caveats, without allergies. You don't owe anyone a relationship that makes you feel like your joy is an inconvenience." It hit harder than I expected. I don't think he meant to make me feel that way. "Intentions are cute," she said, "but impact is what you live with." I sat back on the couch, quietly chewing. She let the silence settle. Then, "You ever see him around other dogs?" That stuck. I thought about it. I couldn't remember. There were photos of him with Emily's dog back when they were together, a huge golden retriever named Hudson, but I hadn't seen him near a dog since. I said, "He used to have no problem." Kayla tilted her head. "So what changed? The dog or the girlfriend?" I didn't answer because I knew the answer. I just wasn't ready to say it out loud. Later, after Finn fell asleep with his head on my foot, I helped Kayla clean up. She handed me a container of leftovers and kissed the top of my head. "Love doesn't make you shrink, she said quietly. Remember that. I nodded, told her I would. But as I walked home, Finn trotting beside me, leash loose, I realized I hadn't remembered that for a long time. I'd let someone make my joy feel like a liability. And I let it happen because I wanted to believe the best in him. And maybe because believing in him was easier than believing I deserved better. Finn started whining when I grabbed my keys. At first, it was just a soft sound, barely there, like he was clearing his throat. But then it turned into pacing, circling the front door, sitting and standing, tail low, ears back, watching me like he could already feel the night stretching without me in it. I crouched down. I'll be back, bud, it's just one night. He nudged his head into my chest like he didn't believe me. And honestly, neither did I. Because just one night had turned into 3, then 5, then most of the week. I kept telling myself I was staying at Theo's to keep things balanced, to protect the relationship, to make it easier for him to be with me. But Finn wasn't stupid. Dogs never are, he could feel it. The energy, the distance, the way our home stopped smelling like routine and started smelling like absence. One night, after I'd been gone 2 days, I came home to shredded paper towels across the kitchen. He'd gotten into the bin, nothing dangerous, just messy. I stood there, staring at the scene, and felt something I hadn't let myself feel in weeks. Guilt, not because of the mess, but because I'd abandoned the only one in the entire situation who had never asked me to choose. I knelt down and called his name. He didn't come right away. I waited. Eventually, he padded out from the bedroom, slow. Like he wasn't sure if he was in trouble, like he wasn't sure how much of me he was still allowed to trust. I whispered, "Hey." He came over finally, pressed his head into my hands. I scratched behind his ears, felt the weight of the whole week settle in my chest. I looked around. His toys hadn't moved. His bowls were still full. The couch was clean, untouched, because I hadn't let him on it. Because I'd told myself restrictions meant compromise. But compromise was just a prettier word for sacrificing the parts of my life that made me feel like myself. And for what? Theo hadn't been over in 10 days. Not once. Every maybe this weekend turned into something came up. I started noticing how easy it was for him to suggest alternatives that didn't involve my space. How natural it was for him to say, "You can just bring an overnight bag." He made it sound convenient, but it wasn't. It was erosion, slow and polite. Finn followed me into the bedroom and laid down with a heavy sigh. I sat beside him and watched his chest rise and fall. That sigh, that dog sigh that's somewhere between contentment and resignation, cut straight through me. Because I knew that sound. I'd made that sound in Theo's apartment more than once. Lying next to someone I loved, but shrinking a little just to keep things smooth. That night, I didn't text Theo. I didn't explain where I was or why I wasn't coming. I just stayed. Let Finn curl up beside me. Let the silence sit without checking if it was okay with someone else. I lit the candle I liked, turned on the playlist I missed, and fell asleep with my dog at my feet. The next morning, I didn't race to get dressed or clean up the apartment or double-check the vacuum lines in the rug. I just fed Finn, took him for a walk, let him sniff every corner of the park like we had all the time in the world. And for the first time in weeks, I didn't feel like I was choosing between my relationship and my life. I was just living it. And Finn, who didn't ask for clean rugs or filtered air or proof of love, looked up at me with the same wide eyes he always had. He wasn't anxious anymore, because I wasn't leaving. I wasn't supposed to be home that early. A meeting got canceled last minute, so I decided to take the long way back. Grab a coffee, let Finn stretch his legs. I didn't even bring a proper leash, just the short one I use when we're not going far. It was sunny in that lazy, late afternoon way. The park wasn't crowded. A few people with laptops on benches, some kids kicking a ball too close to the pond, and a guy throwing a tennis ball across the grass. I noticed the golden retriever first. Big, goofy, well-groomed, the kind of dog that makes you smile just by existing. He sprinted after the ball like it was the only thing that had ever mattered. Ears flying, paws barely touching the ground. I smiled, looked up to see who he belonged to, and that's when I saw Theo. He was standing in the middle of the grass, laughing, no inhaler, no red eyes, no distance. Just him, hoodie sleeves pushed up, sneakers half covered in grass stains, holding the same slobbery tennis ball the retriever kept dropping at his feet. I stopped walking. Finn paused, sniffed something near a bench, but even he seemed to sense my sudden stillness. Theo hadn't seen me yet. I stood there for a few seconds, like my brain couldn't fully register what I was looking at. Like maybe it wasn't him, but it was. And then the golden trotted back toward him, tail wagging, tongue out, and I saw the pink name tag on the collar. Hudson, Emily's dog, his ex's dog. The one he barely saw anymore, who stayed with her full time, who probably forgot who he even was. That's what he said. But here he was, tossing a ball, giggling like a teenager, not a single sign of discomfort on his face. My throat went dry. I didn't approach. Not at first. Just watched from across the path as Hudson dropped the ball again, and Theo patted his head before sending it flying across the grass. Like it was a scene he'd been rehearsing in my absence. I took a step back. Finn looked up at me. Theo turned, our eyes met, and in that moment something in his face crumpled, not surprise, guilt, recognition. The caught-in-the-act stillness of someone who hadn't planned for a witness. He opened his mouth, closed it, then jogged toward me, ball still in hand. Hudson followed, happy as ever. "Hey," he said, breathless. This isn't what it looks like." I laughed, not because it was funny, but because it was exactly what it looked like. "You're allergic," I said flatly. He rubbed the back of his neck. "It's different. Hudson's a golden. They're hypoallergenic." I raised an eyebrow. "They're not." He blinked. "Okay, but he's older, less shedding, it's not the same." "It's literally the same." Theo shifted his weight, looked down, then up. "I didn't think you'd be here." "That part's obvious." Hudson sat beside him, panting, leaning against his leg like they were a team. I looked at Finn, who'd been so careful around Theo, who'd spent weeks being exiled for causing a reaction that apparently didn't apply to golden retrievers in open spaces. My stomach turned. "I have to go," I said, turning the leash in my hand. "Wait," Theo said, reaching out. "Let me explain. I think I get it. It's not like that. You said you couldn't breathe around dogs. I said around your dog. And there it was. I didn't say another word. I just turned and walked away, Finn by my side, ears perked like he was ready to follow me anywhere. Theo didn't chase me. Not because he didn't want to, because he knew there was nothing left to say. He texted me before I got home. "Can we talk? Please don't shut down before you hear me out." I stared at the screen, thumb hovering. Not out of indecision, just out of disbelief. Like I needed a second to catch up to how quickly the script had flipped. 20 minutes ago, I was walking my dog in the park, coffee in hand, thinking I might stop at the grocery store. Now I was the woman who caught her boyfriend playing fetch with his ex's dog after months of pretending she lived with a four-legged allergen. I didn't respond. 10 minutes later, he was outside my apartment. He buzzed. Twice. Then he texted again. "I'm outside. I'm sorry, just 5 minutes. Please." I buzzed him in. Not because I owed him. Not because I was open to being convinced. I just needed to see his face when I asked the question I'd been holding in since the second he turned around in that park. He stood in the hallway, eyes a little wide, like he wasn't sure how much trouble he was in yet. I didn't invite him in, just crossed my arms and leaned against the doorframe. "So," I said. "Let's hear it." He opened his mouth, then closed it. Classic Theo move, start strong, retreat quickly. "Okay, first of all, I should have told you." "Which part?" I asked. "That your lung capacity miraculously holds up around golden retrievers. Or that you've been hanging out with your ex's dog while mine waits by the door for you to show up." "That's not fair," he said, his voice soft. "It's not like that." "No," I tilted my head. "Then explain." "Hudson's different," he said, wincing even as he said it. "I've known him for years. I guess I'm used to him. It's not the same reaction." I stared at him. "You lied." I panicked. "No," I said. "You chose to lie, and you kept lying. Every time I asked if it was getting better, every time I adjusted my life to make it easier for you, you let me." "I didn't want to make it a thing," he said. "But you did. You made it a thing and then pretended it wasn't happening." I took a step closer. "You didn't just avoid my apartment. You made me feel like my dog was a problem. Like I was selfish for being disappointed you couldn't be here." "I didn't mean to." "But you did," I cut in. And you let me believe it was something wrong with Finn, not with you. Not with the story you were spinning. Theo ran a hand through his hair. I didn't know how to bring it up. You could have told the truth. I didn't want to hurt you. I laughed. You didn't want to be uncomfortable. That's not the same thing. He looked down, exhaled. You're right. That was almost more insulting than denial. He didn't fight me. He just agreed, like admitting it made it better, like being caught was the worst part. I didn't say anything for a moment, just watched him, waiting to feel something that would change how the next few minutes would go. But I didn't. Not anger, not sadness. Just the final click of a lock in my brain. So why was it okay for her dog? I asked, voice even. Theo blinked. I don't know. No allergy symptoms, no itchy eyes, no dramatic coughing. I said I don't know. I think you do, I said. You just didn't want to choose. His face shifted, guilt or shame, I couldn't tell, but I saw it. You wanted both, I said. Her dog, your clean apartment, and me, running around trying to make my home safe for someone who was never planning to stay. He opened his mouth again, closed it, nodded. I took a step back and pointed to the hallway. We're done. He didn't argue, he just said, I'm sorry. I know. And that was it, no tears, no scene. Just a man who got caught in a lie too small to make him evil and too consistent to make him forgivable. I didn't scream. I didn't text Kayla. I didn't write a long, dramatic caption for Instagram. I went home, poured a glass of wine, and ordered Finn a matching pajama set. It was ridiculous. Blue flannel with little moons and clouds printed on it. I'd seen it once on a pet site and laughed, thinking only the most unhinged dog parents would go that far. That night, I became one of them. I didn't do it to be petty. It wasn't revenge. It was clarity. A quiet, almost ceremonial reclaiming of something I'd let slide. Of all the moments, I chose diplomacy over instinct. Of the weeks, I let someone else decide what parts of my life were lovable. Finn lay on the couch beside me, head on a cushion, snoring like he'd worked a shift. His legs twitched once in his sleep, maybe dreaming of the park. Or maybe just remembering what it feels like to be included again. I reached down and scratched behind his ear. He didn't wake up. I thought about everything I'd done over the past few months. The purifiers, the cleaning swaps, the air filters, the quiet, desperate recalibrating. All of it done in the name of compromise. All of it chipped away at who I was and how I lived. And Finn. He just kept waiting for me to come back to myself. The pajamas arrived 2 days later. I opened the box slowly, expecting to laugh. But I didn't. They were cuter than I thought. Soft. Absurdly well-made. I laid them out like a gift. Finn watched me with mild suspicion while I wrangled his legs into the sleeves, adjusted the Velcro under his belly. He blinked up at me once, then sat still. When I finished, he looked proud. Like maybe he understood on some gut level that he was being claimed. Celebrated. I snapped a photo. In it, he's sitting on the couch, head tilted, the moonprint fabric wrapping around him like a hug. It was the most peaceful I'd felt in months. I lit a candle. The one I stopped burning because Theo said it gave him pressure behind the eyes. I turned on music I hadn't played since the Allergy saga began. Something warm and slow, and a little nostalgic. And I sat down beside my dog. He curled into me, pajamas and all, without hesitation. No tests, no compromises, no trade-offs, just love. Soft and undemanding. I didn't cry, I didn't gloat. I just let myself exhale. And for the first time since Theo pulled that cough out of nowhere and called it love, I felt like someone who remembered who she was. Theo showed up the next morning. I heard the knock while I was making coffee. Finn perked up immediately, tail halfway wagging, then slowing, confused. I looked through the peephole. Of course it was him. I considered not opening the door, but something in me wanted the conversation finished. Not dragged out over text. Not left on read. Just done clean. I opened it. He looked tired. Hoodie, jeans, eyes shadowed, not like he hadn't slept, but like he hadn't stopped spinning the story in his head. I didn't step aside. Just leaned against the frame. What? I wanted to apologize, he said. You did that already. He nodded. I know, He looked down. I keep thinking about how I handled it, and how much you did to accommodate me. I shouldn't have let it go that far. I said nothing, and I shouldn't have lied about Hudson. No, I said, you really shouldn't have. There was a pause. Theo glanced behind me like he expected to see the apartment he remembered. The soft lighting, the dog bowl tucked away discreetly, the couch he'd claimed early on as his nap spot. Instead, Finn stood behind me in flannel pajamas, ears up, watching him. Theo blinked. Is he wearing clothes? Yeah, I said. We match now. He gave a quick, confused laugh. You're not serious. Dead serious. Another beat of silence. Then he said, You're really mad. I shook my head. I'm not, that's the thing. He looked at me, waiting. I'm not mad. I'm done. He swallowed. Can we at least talk about it? We are talking. Okay, but he rubbed the back of his neck. Don't you think this is an overreaction? I messed up. I've admitted that, but we had something. I stared at him, calm, clear. You're calling it an overreaction because I'm not yelling. Because I'm not falling apart in front of you. But you don't get to decide the size of the consequence. He didn't move. You lied, I said, voice steady. You manipulated the situation. You made me feel like my dog, this quiet, loyal, uncomplicated animal, was the reason we couldn't be together. And the truth is, it was you the whole time. Theo's jaw flexed. You told me it wasn't personal, I continued. That you couldn't help it. That you wished it were different. And all the while, you were throwing a ball for your ex's dog while mine sat by the door wondering where you went. His mouth opened, but I held up a hand. I rearranged my life. My home, my routines. I felt guilty for wanting you to come over. I felt selfish for being disappointed. And all of that was based on a lie you told because you didn't want to deal with whatever was really going on. His eyes dropped. You're right. I know. I just thought we could work through it. We could've, I said. If you'd been honest, but you weren't. You made me feel crazy for asking questions. He looked up. I didn't mean to. But you did it anyway. I stepped back just enough to let the conversation settle. Behind me, Finn let out a soft sigh, like even he knew the script was finished. Theo looked at me like he wanted to say more, but there was nothing left. Take care, I said, not unkind, just final. I closed the door, locked it. Not with a bang, not with tears, just a simple, quiet click. Finn patted over, leaned against my leg. I looked down at him, still wrapped in moon-end cloud pajamas. You made me feel crazy, I whispered. And then, more to myself than anyone else. Never again. The phrase came out of my mouth before I even realized I'd been holding it in. You made me feel crazy. I said it softly. Not like an accusation, more like a fact I'd finally stopped editing. Theo stood there, blinking, as if he'd never heard those words before. Or maybe just never expected to hear them said so plainly, without heat. You made me feel like I was selfish for wanting you to be around. Like I was asking too much. Like I was ruining something good by needing the truth. He shifted his weight from one foot to the other. That wasn't my intention. That's not the point. I sat down on the arm of the couch. Finn looked between us, tail still, like he could feel the energy shift. I started second-guessing myself constantly. Every time you looked tired, every time you cleared your throat, I'd vacuum twice, wash Finn's blankets, cancel plans here so I could sleep at your place. Theo opened his mouth to say something. I didn't let him. You let me believe it was about your health. You let me believe my joy was a threat to your body. And the worst part, you made it seem like I was kind for adjusting. Like I was a great girlfriend for choosing you over my own space. Over my dog. His face tightened. I wasn't trying to manipulate you. But you did. There was a long pause. No one moved. You didn't just lie, I said. You arranged the whole situation so that the only way I could prove I cared about you was by sacrificing something I loved. And the moment I started doing that, you stopped trying. You faded, you disappeared into comfort. He looked down. I would have respected the truth, I added. Even if it hurt, but you didn't give me that chance, you gave me performance. I didn't know what else to do, he said finally. You could have said, I'm not ready for this kind of life. I don't want to date someone with a dog. I still have feelings tied up in my past. I'm not over it. He looked up. That's not what this was. Then what was it? I asked. Because all I saw was a man who loved the idea of me, until I came with something you couldn't control. Theo didn't answer. I stood up. I'm not angry, not really, I'm just tired. I'm tired of being made to feel unstable, because someone else doesn't want to deal with their own discomfort. He nodded slowly. I don't hate you, I said, but I don't trust you anymore. and I don't want to share my life with someone who treats my happiness like it's optional." Theo let out a small, breathy laugh, the kind that comes out when there's nothing left to say. "Okay," he said, that was it. Not "I understand," not "I'll fix it." Just okay. He turned, walked toward the door, then paused with his hand on the knob. "I really did love you." I nodded. I really did love you too. And then he left. I didn't cry. I sat down next to Finn, who climbed into my lap like he'd been waiting for this moment. I wrapped my arms around him and closed my eyes. There was nothing dramatic about it. No explosion, no vindication. Just a sense that I'd finally said what needed to be said. And this time, I didn't apologize for it. I thought we were done. But of course, Theo couldn't leave it there. It was 2 days later when the message came in, long, rambling, full of deflection disguised as reflection. "I've been thinking a lot about everything. About us. I know I messed up. I know I didn't handle it right. But I think you're blowing this out of proportion. It was a misunderstanding, not some grand manipulation. I didn't lie to hurt you. I lied because I was overwhelmed, and I didn't know how to say what I felt without making things worse." I read it twice, then a third time, and by the end, I could barely tell if he was trying to apologize or rewrite the story so he didn't look so bad in it. The last line, "I hope you can look back and see that I really did try. I hope you don't let one mistake erase everything." One mistake. That was the part that made me close my eyes and exhale through my nose. Because it wasn't one mistake. It was the pattern of it. The slow, deliberate distortion of reality. The way he twisted discomfort into victimhood so I'd feel guilty for having boundaries. This wasn't some isolated flinch of immaturity. It was who he had shown himself to be, one polite excuse at a time. Theo was always so calm, so gracious, so reasonable. It took me a long time to realize that's exactly how people get away with making you feel crazy, by being just rational enough that you start doubting your own instincts. I opened the message again, thought about replying. Just one line: "You weren't allergic to my dog, you were allergic to being honest." But I didn't send it. Because what would be the point? He didn't want a conversation. He wanted a softened ending. Something he could hold up to his friends and say, "See, we handled it like adults." But I wasn't interested in being someone's moral alibi. So I blocked the number. Not with rage, not with satisfaction. Just with a quiet kind of clarity. He had said what he needed to say, and I had finally learned not to answer things that weren't really questions. Changing the locks wasn't about fear. It wasn't about making a statement, either. It was just time. I scheduled it for a Saturday. The locksmith came right at noon. A quiet guy. Efficient. He didn't ask questions, didn't make small talk. Just nodded when I pointed to the door, said he'd have it done in 20 minutes. Finn watched from the couch, head on his paws, ears flicking at each sound of the drill. He didn't bark, didn't get up, just observed, like he understood. When the locksmith finished, I paid in cash, thanked him, and closed the new door behind him. The click of it felt heavier, not louder, just final. I stood there for a second, not because I doubted it, just because I wanted to feel what a fresh boundary sounded like. It was quiet. I walked into the living room, where Finn had already resumed his nap. I sat next to him, scratched under his chin, and grabbed my phone. No unread messages, nothing waiting. So I texted Kayla, "Me locks changed." "Finn is wearing the pajamas. I am lighting candles. We're both thriving." She replied immediately. "Kayla, God-tier energy. Send pic or it didn't happen." I snapped a photo. Finn on the couch in his cloud print pajamas, head tilted like he knew he was part of something symbolic. Behind him, the soft glow of a candle. My blanket draped over the armrest. The quiet claim of a space returned to itself. I sent it. "Kayla, tell me again why we ever let men have access to our peace?" I laughed. The kind that starts in your stomach and rolls out slow. Not bitter, not triumphant, just real. Because it was funny, in a way. That I'd let someone convince me my dog, this gentle, sleeping bundle of fur, was the problem. That my home was the irritant. That love was about compromise, even when I was the only one doing the bending. I hadn't realized how much I'd been flinching until I stopped. The new lock wasn't a punishment. It wasn't an overreaction. It was a reset. I opened the windows. Let the air move through the apartment without worrying about what it carried. I lit another candle. put on a playlist that hadn't touched my speakers since the last time Theo spent the night. Finn climbed onto the couch next to me, pressed his side against mine, and sighed. The kind of sigh that doesn't ask for anything. I leaned my head back and whispered, "We're good." And we were. It hit later, not all at once, just a slow sting. I was brushing my teeth, staring at myself in the mirror when the question showed up out of nowhere. Was I really that easy to lie to? I spat out the toothpaste, rinsed, leaned against the sink. Finn was already curled up on the bed in his pajamas, totally unbothered by the existential crisis brewing 3 feet away. I walked into the bedroom and sat on the edge of the mattress, pulled the blanket into my lap, picked at the seam. I wasn't missing Theo. I was missing the part of me that hadn't yet realized how far I'd bent to keep things from falling apart. The part of me that thought I was being patient when I was really just being avoided. And that question kept circling. Was I that easy to lie to? The answer wasn't yes. It was worse, I'd known. Not outright, not in neon lights, but in that quiet, uncomfortable way your body knows something's off. The way you feel when someone smiles while pulling away. When someone tells you it's nothing, but their eyes dart just enough to say it's something. Theo never had to be convincing. He just had to seem calm while I twisted myself into knots, and I mistook my effort for our stability. I remembered the day I ordered the air purifier, the hours I spent researching dog shampoos, the way I'd defended him to Kayla like the truth was up for debate. I felt ashamed, but not for being lied to, for choosing doubt over my own instincts, for thinking that loving someone meant working harder every time they pulled away. I leaned back on the bed and stared at the ceiling. I wasn't angry. I was disappointed in how little it took to shift my center of gravity. One fake cough, one explanation wrapped in concern, and I rebuilt my life around it. Finn stirred, thumped his tail once, then sighed. I reached down and scratched his head. "You knew, didn't you?" He blinked, unbothered. Dogs don't need proof. They read energy, consistency, presence. If I had followed Finn's lead from the beginning, I wouldn't have needed Kayla or the vet or the purifier to tell me the truth. I already had it, and I chose someone else's comfort over my own clarity. That's what stung. Not the breakup. Not the lie. Just the quiet fact that I gave up parts of my life for someone who didn't even have the decency to be honest about why they didn't want to be in it. I wrote the message in one sitting. It wasn't planned. I didn't light a candle or put on soft music or do anything cinematic. I just sat on the floor with Finn snoring nearby and opened the Notes app on my phone. Theo, you know what still gets me? I think you actually believed your own excuses. That's what makes it worse, not that you lied, but that you told the kind of lie that's easier to believe than to confront. You said you were allergic. You coughed, you rubbed your eyes, you made it sound medical, and I bought it. Because I wanted to be understanding. Because I thought that's what people in relationships do, they make space. They adjust. I wish you just said, "I don't want a life with a dog in it," or "I'm not ready to share you," or even, "I don't know how to make room for something that doesn't serve me." That would have sucked, but at least it would have been honest. Instead, you made me feel like my dog was the problem, like my space was toxic, like I had to keep fixing something that was never actually broken. I washed blankets until my hands cracked. I bought an air purifier that hummed all night. I trained Finn not to jump on the couch, something I never wanted to do, not really. And you thanked me like I was a hero, while walking your ex's golden retriever behind my back. You made me feel selfish for wanting you to show up. You turned avoidance into illness. And then when I caught you, you called it a misunderstanding. I paused there, scrolled up, reread the lines, wondered if I was being cruel. I wasn't. I was just being specific. I kept writing. Here's what I know now. You weren't allergic to Finn. You were allergic to honesty, to discomfort, to having a conversation that didn't end with someone apologizing for making you feel anything at all. I used to think I was good at protecting myself, but with you, I protected the lie longer than I protected the truth. I excused your flinching. I called your withdrawal sensitivity. I labeled your distance gentleness. But you weren't being gentle. You were just disappearing in slow motion. I stared at that last line for a while. Then I added one more thing. I don't hate you, but I see you now, and I don't want you back. I sat there with the message for another 5 minutes. Maybe 10. Not to edit it, not to soften it, just to let it exist. Then I tapped Select All. Deleted it, it wasn't for him. It was for me. I didn't need to send it. I didn't need the last word. I just needed to say it once, clearly, calmly, and without performing. And that was enough. The apartment felt lighter, not metaphorically. Actually, physically lighter. Like someone had cracked a window I didn't realize had been sealed for months. It wasn't the new locks or the absence of Theo's sneakers by the door. It was the shift in air, the return of ease. Finn sprawled out on the bed, my bed now, fully. His pajama buttons askew, one leg kicked off like he'd gotten too warm in the night. He looked ridiculous, like a retired circus performer. I stood at the door and watched him for a second before walking into the kitchen. No text from Theo. No messages. No sighs from me, wondering if today was the day he'd make sense again. I made coffee. Real coffee. Not the bland, watery brand Theo liked. I ground the beans like I used to. Played my slow morning playlist. Let it play without skipping the sad songs. I stopped moving like someone else was watching. And that's when I realized it wasn't loneliness I'd been afraid of. It was silence. Because silence meant sitting with what I already knew. That I'd bent myself into the shape of low maintenance. That I'd overcorrected for someone else's discomfort so many times I couldn't recognize my own anymore. That I'd mistaken compromise for closeness. Finn wandered into the kitchen, sat next to me like he always did, and sighed. I looked down at him. You okay? He blinked up at me like, we're fine. You're late to the party, but we're fine. I left the dishes in the sink. Turned off my phone, walked around barefoot. There was no voice in my head calculating whether the space was clean enough, quiet enough, Theo-proof enough. I stopped censoring the things that made me feel at home. Finn curled back up on the couch and I stretched out beside him. No laptop, no mental to-do list, just quiet, not empty, not punished, just still. I looked around the room and didn't feel like something was missing. I didn't feel abandoned. I didn't feel single. I just felt returned to myself. And I thought, oh, this is what it's like when your home doesn't brace for someone else. It was a DM from Emily. Simple. Plain. No punctuation, no emoji. Hey, sorry if he dragged you into anything. He never really stopped showing up here, even after we broke up. I stared at the screen for a long time. It wasn't aggressive. It wasn't even dramatic. Just direct, like someone who was done being polite. I didn't answer right away. I clicked on her profile, something I hadn't done since early in mine and Theo's relationship, back when I was still comparing myself to strangers I had no business measuring against. She looked exactly like I remembered. Soft eyes, big, earnest smile, a few photos of Hudson, including one from last week at the park. The one Theo must have taken. The one he posted and captioned, "Old boy still's got it." I remember liking that post. I didn't even think twice. Now I knew better. I went back to her message and typed, "Thanks for telling me. I had a feeling, but yeah." I hovered over the send button, then deleted it. Instead, I closed the app, stared out the window for a while. Emily didn't owe me anything. She didn't know me. She didn't need to reach out. But she did, and that, in its own weird way, was the final piece of the story I'd been trying to assemble. Theo hadn't just lied to me. He'd rerun the same script, with different women. Same dog. I wasn't special. I was just next. That sounds bitter, but it's not. It's freeing, actually. Knowing it wasn't about me. That all the twisting, all the shrinking I did, it didn't come from some unique flaw in me that made him pull away. It came from him. From a man who didn't know how to live inside a relationship unless he was controlling the frame. Emily saw it. She'd just gotten out sooner, or maybe not. Maybe she'd bent too. Maybe she'd walked through the same slow unraveling and made different choices. Either way, she was out now. And so was I. The weirdest part? I didn't feel betrayed by her. I felt grateful. Because if the version of me that stayed quiet and polite had still been running the show, I might have assumed this was all a misunderstanding. That Theo had simply made a mistake. That I should be more forgiving. But now I saw it for what it was. A man who kept returning to old comfort while treating new connections like hobbies. Finn hopped onto the couch beside me, tail thumping twice, then still. He rested his head on my thigh. And I thought, we're done here. No reply needed. No clarification required. I knew the truth now, and the truth was enough. Kayla showed up with wine and a grocery bag full of snacks she didn't ask me if I wanted. She just let herself in. She still had a spare key from that time I got locked out a year ago, and said, "I'm not here to talk about him. I'm here to celebrate your dog's wardrobe and your return to sanity." Finn trotted over, sniffed her bag, then flopped dramatically at her feet. She stared down at him. "You look ridiculous," she said, "and I respect it." He yawned, didn't move. She held up the wine. "Red or white?" I shrugged, "Surprise me." We ended up on the floor, plates balanced on our knees, watching a baking show we weren't really following. Kayla poured generously. Finn eventually migrated to the space between us, resting his head on my thigh like he was hosting. She nudged me with her foot. "How's it been, really?" I took a sip. "Weirdly good, still a little raw. But solid." She nodded. "Raw is honest. We didn't talk about Theo." "Not really." She didn't ask for details. I didn't offer a play-by-play. It wasn't avoidance, it was respect. Like we both understood there was no value in replaying something that had already collapsed under its own weight. Instead, she asked about Finn's pajama sizing. Do they run small? Because he looks like he's auditioning for a Wes Anderson film. And whether I'd ever considered printing a photo of him for my Christmas card. We laughed a lot, the kind that's easy. That doesn't come with a crash on the other side. At one point, Kayla refilled our glasses and said, "You know what I love? You didn't burn the place down, you just quietly reclaimed it." I smiled. I thought about the burning part. "Of course you did, but this is better." We toasted to that, to dogs in clothes, to women who don't explain themselves, to exits without spectacle. It was nothing flashy, no emotional breakthrough. Just wine, snacks, and the feeling of someone sitting beside you who wants nothing from you except your full, flawed self. And maybe a few crackers. Finn snored between us, unbothered by everything. And I realized I wasn't healing because I'd finally figured everything out. I was healing because I'd stopped making excuses for someone who only showed up on his terms. And because I had people who showed up with wine and stayed until the silence felt easy again. I took Finn to my parents' house for the weekend. They lived about an hour out, enough distance to make it feel like a mini road trip. Finn sat in the passenger seat, window cracked, ears flapping just slightly in the breeze. He looked like he was on his way to accept a Lifetime Achievement Award in his pajama set. My mom met us at the door with a gasp and both hands on her chest. "Oh my God," she said. "He's dressed." "He's dignified," I said. Finn trotted past her into the kitchen like he owned the place. My dad was already pulling leftovers out of the fridge. "Does he eat real food?" "He's a dog, Dad. Some people give them sweet potatoes and salmon now." I read that somewhere. "He eats kibble." He pointed at the fridge. "Good, because I'm not sharing my pot roast." We sat around the table, Finn at my feet, while my parents asked the usual questions. Was I eating enough? Was I sleeping okay? Did I need money for anything? The answer was always no, but they asked anyway. I didn't tell them much about Theo. Just that it ended, that it was the right thing, and that I was fine. My mom reached across the table, squeezed my hand, and said, "I'm proud of you." I smiled and looked down. For what? For not shrinking. She didn't know the details. She didn't need to. Later, while we were watching a movie none of us cared about, my mom came into the living room holding something in her hands. "I found this in the sale bin at the co-op," she said, grinning. It was a dog sweater, cream-colored, tiny buttons. A ridiculous collar. I thought it looked like something he could wear to brunch. Finn wagged his tail politely while she slipped it over his head. My dad walked in, took one look, and said, "You two look related now." And somehow that cracked me. Not into tears, not into laughter, just a small swell in my chest. The kind that says, this is what it's supposed to feel like. Not performance, not conditions. Just easy affection, shared space, a room full of people who love you without making you earn it. I sat back, warm cup of tea in hand, Finn in his new sweater on the floor, my dad already dozing off during the movie. And I thought, I spent so much time trying to protect a relationship that couldn't even handle my dog. But this was love that made room. Theo's name popped up on my phone late Sunday night. Not a call, just a long message. One of those quiet, aching walls of text that people send when they know they've already lost the right to say it out loud. I didn't open it right away. I stared at the preview on the lock screen. just enough to catch the first line. I keep thinking about the last time I saw you. I knew the rest before I even opened it. I waited until Finn was asleep, curled into a tight cinnamon roll beside me on the couch, one leg twitching with whatever dream he was having, and then I finally read it. The message was exactly what I expected. Nostalgic, careful, vague in all the right places. No apology, no ownership, just the curated heartbreak of someone who wanted to be missed without being accountable. I keep thinking about the last time I saw you, how calm you were, how final it felt. I know I didn't handle things well, but I hope you can remember the good parts too. You brought so much light into my life. I miss laughing with you. I miss Finn. I miss the quiet mornings. Then the ending. You probably won't respond. And that's okay. Just know you mattered to me. I read it once. I didn't cry. I didn't replay memories. I didn't reread the text he was referencing. I didn't reach for the version of me that used to crave those words. I just sat there and let the weight of it pass through without sticking. He missed me, but not enough to show up when it counted. Not enough to tell the truth when it mattered. He wanted closure without the discomfort of earning it. He wanted the part where I soften without the part where he owns the damage. I set the phone down, blocked the number. No ceremony. No screenshots sent to Kayla, just a decision. It wasn't punishment. It was a clean end to a story I didn't want to read again. Because the real message, the one I'd already chosen, quietly and without noise, was this. I mattered to me too, and that mattered more. Finn and I spent Sunday night exactly how we wanted to, in matching pajamas, curled up on the couch, no sound but the low hum of the heater and his breathing. No phone buzzing. No texts from someone waiting for a softened response. No half-hearted check-ins or guilt-drenched memories disguised as compliments, just stillness. I turned the lights low, lit one candle, the same scent Theo used to say was a little too much. It was bergamot and clove and vanilla and peace. The kind of peace that doesn't announce itself, it just arrives and settles in like it's always been welcome. Finn rested his head on my lap. His pajamas were slightly wrinkled from the dryer, one sleeve a little crooked, but he didn't care. I scratched behind his ear and he sighed. That deep dog sigh, like everything he needed was already in the room. And it was. I used to think closure would come with a final message, an apology, a truth that cleared the air. But it didn't. It came in layers, in not responding, in sleeping through the night without checking a phone, in realizing that love that asks you to shrink isn't love, it's a performance. I didn't feel sad anymore. I felt quiet, comfortable in the space I'd reclaimed. There was no need to mark the end with fireworks or bitterness. There was no part of me waiting to be seen or heard or validated. Not by him, not by anyone who couldn't show up the first time. I looked around my apartment. The couch wasn't cluttered with compromise anymore. The air was mine. The light was soft and forgiving. Nothing felt missing. Finn shifted in his sleep, his paw brushing my leg. I pulled the blanket over both of us. Picked up my book. Read one page, then another. No background noise, no questions, no negotiation, just calm, just enough. Just me, my dog, and the full, ordinary stillness of a life that no longer required explanation. And that was everything. Thank you for watching. Please do not forget to like, comment, share, and subscribe. I love you all.